Kelsey, what kind of dog is that behind you? I thought that was a bear.
He he kind of resembles one. He is a Chow Pit mix.
Oh, okay.
And needy.
Oh. Uh, I I'm at my condo in Lake Lure, and we have a bear problem here. I'm kind of on alert for bears.
Well, there's not one in my living room, I promise.
Well, that's good.
There is one that likes to live in the woods behind my house, though. So,
Where's that?
I'm in Greer, South Carolina.
I'm just almost geographically north of you. I'm in Lake Lure. My condo's in Lake Lure, and so we've got terrible bear problems here with the trash around the resort, and you can't even walk out during. They've gotten really bold. They're out during the day now. Wow. Used to be they were only out at night, but they're getting in our trash. Got them buried in the ground, and they're still ripping the lids off and getting in them. Something came out a few minutes ago about the bears, and so I guess they're out today. It's really hot here. I know it's hot in Greer.
Yeah, we hit about 95 today.
Yeah, I think so. And so let's see. Where are you at in Greer? Are you at I could look at the spreadsheet. Are you at Man?
I actually work in Spartanburg District 1 at Landrum High School.
Oh, you're at Landrum. Oh, yeah, that's 19 miles, something like that.
Yeah, it's really close. We have a lot of people in the theater community who do the summer shows, especially when it was the anniversary of Dirty Dancing and all that. One of the dance teachers who choreographs our work, actually, she was in Dirty Dancing. So she went up and did some of the choreography with it.
Right. They do the Dirty Dancing Festival here at the resort.
Yes.
Here at Rumland Bald, where I am. My wife and I are from here. Our home is at Lake Norman. We've lived there for 20 years.
I grew up in Lake Norman areas, believe it or not.
we live on the south end of the lake in Cornelius.
Very cool. I grew up right near Charlotte,
so, but we're from here, and so I stay here during the week. I like it here, but yeah, we're from here. My golf partner, he actually lived right across from the 5th tee out here. That's where his home was. He's a Wilson. You're either a Wilson or a McDaniel from this part of the world, and so, but yeah, the Dirty Dancing. We've been to all the locations. My wife, I was telling Steve, my wife watches it all the time. But yeah, they do the reenactment of the scene where he holds her up in the water out at right behind the clubhouse here, or the lodge house here at Rumland Bald on the beach there. I don't know what they're going to do. It's normally this month. I don't know. I haven't heard what they're going to do.
I haven't heard anything either. I wonder if they're
do some things over at the lodge, right there on the beach on the other side of from us. We're on the east side, but yeah, but it's no, it reminds me of my childhood when I watched that movie. It makes me feel young again. Dr. Laws, are you with us tonight?
I can't believe you feel young again.
I can't either. Just when I watched that movie.
Okay. Well, just don't break into having the time of your life.
I've never felt this way before. I swear it's the truth.
Yeah.
And I owe it all to you.
I'm sorry, everybody. Welcome tonight. And I'm sorry I was late. I was talking to a student in another cohort, and hearing her stories and knowing that you all have to be exhausted each day as you try to adjust to this school year. We're gonna get right on it. We're gonna good discussions for our chapters tonight, and we'll end on time like we always do. So if we run out of time, then we'll carry it over to the next week. I hope you all got the email with the revised schedule of activities. That's also on Blackboard, and it's not huge adjustments. Just note if just look at, make sure yours didn't change. Most of you are doing the same thing as you always have done. We try not to give many assignments, period, because we know what you're going through. But hopefully this will be a good learning experience for everybody. So Yvonne's going to lead us off.
Can I do a shout out right quick to Kevin? He started his OMA and sent his task one in, and it was great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Don't make him feel too important.
Yeah, please don't.
Okay, Yvonne, will you lead us off, please?
Absolutely. So I read chapter 5, which was creating a positive learning climate. And so we're just going to talk about some highlights, really focusing on the beginning aspect, because to me, it really was central to everything. So I'm going to share my PowerPoint. Okay. Can you guys see all that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So just really focusing on creating a positive learning climate was the main thing, which I say it lightly because obviously there's a lot to creating a positive learning climate. And so just kind of touching on that. I really thought that it was important to incorporate the standards. So in looking at this, the idea of standard 5 weighed heavily within this chapter, as well as other standards. But this one really had a lot in it. If you just look at it for a minute, just think about like 3 words that really stand out to you in terms of what administrators do as educational leaders.
All right, she threw that out there in the form of a question.
You know, the main word that sticks out to me is cultivate. I like using that word because it's an action that we're actually doing something, and it kind of goes along with promote as well. So cultivate's my main one, and then the second one is effective, and then the third one that stuck out would be supportive, because you know through support is how all things are accomplished.
Awesome, thank you. Does anybody see any other ones that really stand out to you?
I think in the COVID era we're in right now, well-being for each student is super important. We're in Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools. Our first 2 weeks of classes consisted of just wellness checks, emotion checks for our kids to see how they are, see how they're doing. And, you know, I think it helped us as educators in building those initial relationships with our kids. And a specific thing that happened to me and Katie today when we were doing language arts, we had a kid message us privately and say, my dad keeps telling me he's going to bash my head in. Can y'all call 911 for me? Because I'm afraid if I do, he's going to kill me. So we got to deal with that for about 2 hours this afternoon, but administration commended us because of our quick response. From the time he hit the send on that message, it was 14 minutes before we had notified everybody and actually got the resource officer to his house. So that was awesome.
Yeah, it sounds, I mean that's really essential to everything, to really show that you have that support for students as teachers and also administrators.
Yeah. Well, I called into guidance and she was like, nobody is available right now. And I was like, you need to find them and find me a member of administration. And it was like 30 seconds before I had 2 of them on the phone with me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because there's so many other things that are going on right now that those, I mean, I think that, and we'll kind of talk about this a little bit later, but just the fact that schools are such supportive, safe havens for students, and it's like the one place that they actually have throughout the day that they can rely on being safe, and just establishing that as an administrator is extremely important, but also as a teacher as well, you know?
And just watching for those signals, because kids can give you signals in the strangest ways. And as a virtual teacher, you really have to be aware and watching for those signs, because they can't come to us. You know, they're stuck with that parent or whoever's hurting them or abusing them. They're trapped with them right now. And some of these are sad situations out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there anybody else that wanted to share like one word that stood out to them?
I was going to say inclusive kind of sticks out because I'm a general ed teacher, and what we did for our professional learning module was inclusion in the general ed classroom. And so now I'm more self-aware of making sure it's an inclusive environment for my students and just supporting them. And especially with us being all virtual, I'm trying to make sure that I'm giving all the students the option to have the inclusion that they need, and just making sure that I'm being supportive of them in their academic success.
That's really good. And I think that also the fact that you said that definitely shows that your administration team is being very effective in trying to promote or cultivate that aspect of creating an inclusive environment, which is really great to hear. Okay, so the next one that we have is just looking at, it happens in many schools, which kind of already was mentioned, but the whole idea of something happening and you saying to yourself, like, has this happened before? How frequently is it happening? Will this continue? And it kind of like used the questions that they had in the book, because I really thought, you know, like, what would you do if you had a situation like that? You know, Pam talked about the situation that happened today and how she handled it. I mean, she basically went through the questions, you know, you're probably thinking about it's happened before. How frequently is it? So I need to take care of this right now. Like, we cannot leave until this is handled. And so just kind of thinking about that, just anybody who wants to chime in on how you think you would handle hearing about, just like in the reading, a bullying situation that was taking place. So how would you handle a bullying situation?
Well, in my district, we've adopted the Olveus program. So we actually have a set procedure for bullying. We also have a set definition, and the students are taught that. They have weekly meetings, but in our district, every adult who is employed by the school is trained and empowered and expected to immediately deal with bullying. Don't say, I saw that, I'm going to deal with it. You handle it right then, because the goal is, number one, to address the situation and stop it, but also to empower the students who are bystanders in that situation to become that protective unit for our kids.
Absolutely. It's a very good program. Does anybody else want to chime in on this, on how you would deal with one of these situations?
I would say first and foremost is documentation is always key, is making sure you're taking notes of a situation, making sure that you are, you know, recording your perspective and that you're taking time to talk to the students and get their perspective. Also making sure you know your resources, social worker, counselor, folks like that. And also if you're in a position where, you know, there could be a switch of a team, like if the students continue to have issues with each other, is trying to keep them away from each other so that, you know, the tensions can die down some.
I think it's also important to communicate situations like that with common teachers of a student. So if I have him for inclusion math 8 and another teacher has him for inclusion math, you have to do all teachers and say, here's what I've seen between these kids, or like the whole 8th grade team of teachers, make sure they're all aware, because we're always out, well, if we ever get to go at school, we're out in the hall with those kids during every class change. So they may know, hey, Miss Moore is on to me, so I'm going to go to the far end of the hall to taunt this kid. But if all the teachers know, then it creates an awareness.
Yeah, and I think it also goes back to, oh, was somebody else going to say something? I was going to say that I think it also goes back to that standard. If you really think about it, you know, like everything that you're saying really relates to that, promoting the well-being for students and really trying to think about how you can do that and handle the situation at the same time. And when I was looking at this, I was looking at it from a perspective of a teacher at first. You know, like you think about these things in terms of any kind of incidents that would happen within your classroom. But then, you're going to go a step further by really, dealing with staff and community members as an administrator. So there's going to be a far-reaching level of intervention that's going to have to take place with this. So this is the thing that I think last week when we were talking about the reading, there were certain things that kept coming up over and over and over again. And the two things that kept coming up over and over again within this chapter were orderly, promote student achievement, and caring. I mean, those were the main things that would really lead to a successful climate within a school, positive learning climate. And so within the reading, the main focus was how are these schools developed and maintained? So you think about orderly, promoting student achievement. These are humane schools. How do we develop these type of schools and maintain them? How do we do that?
I think one thing that, my admin team has been really good about is just consistency. I'm from a low income, I'm from a high poverty school, so we tend to have staff turnover a lot, but they've been able to build a BT program and really maintain staff morale, and just keep a staff and just being consistent across the board. I know we're talking about promote student achievement, but that starts at the staff level. So if you have a staff that believes in the students and an admin team that promotes that consistently, I think that's key.
Perfect. Okay. And I pulled a quote out. This actually wasn't from the beginning. It was at the end, because I really kind of jumped out at me as, the whole idea of students being in school and them knowing that they're going to be protected and respected is something that really can have a lifelong impact on students. And so I just wanted to share that one that you came across it obviously when you're reading, but it really stood out to me as being something that was so essential in terms of the school climate. Okay, positive school control. So I just took everything that they talked about in terms of good schools and put them into a little triangle, just kind of like highlighting some words. And again, you'll notice there's a consistent tone or consistent emphasis on orderly, efficient, effective, focusing on safety, focusing on academic aspect of it, and also keeping those high standards and expectations. And so just thinking about your experiences with schools, what are the things that really stood out to you in terms of a good school? What are the top things that you saw happening within your school if you experienced them?
I would have to say support for students. So it's kind of like, making sure that every student is taken care of and cared for and loved. And when all of that happens, you in turn have order. They tend to work better. They tend to be, more attentive when they feel loved and wanted and cared for. And so making them, feel smart or, having successful things for them helps with the order and the efficiency and the student achievement and everything.
Absolutely. It's really essential to that whole aspect. Just kind of keeping these good schools in mind. It's just like really just kind of keying on those specific aspects. Okay, this was another one. It was in the book, but I thought it was really important to highlight the 4 essential ingredients. And so kind of like looking at expectations again, consistent rules and consequences, developing self-esteem of students. And really what I saw more of within this reading, and you may have seen this too, it seemed like taking the time within the school to establish all these things, because you're molding the students to be obviously responsible citizens, and how much of an impact that can have within the school, and how that doesn't happen if there's not a good school climate, which we all know. So thinking about these essential ingredients, which one have you seen the most, would you say, within schools that you categorize as being good schools, would you say?
I've seen the consistent rules and consequences, and I actually like this list because most of all of those things happen when something is in place, when one of them is placed. And I know that it's also with the well implemented self-esteem of the students, when teachers have high expectations of students, and they actually reaffirm what they're doing, the students actually respond better when you have to correct them, because there's that balance there, and you do not lose you don't break the student down. As I've always said, whatever you break down, you have to build up. And a lot of times you find kids being broken down and not built up. But when you build the kids back up, then I see that it makes better for behavior and academics as well.
Absolutely.
I have a question on number 3. It's for anybody in the group. Can you give students self-esteem?
Mm-mm. No, I think you model it and you encourage it. You encourage a positive self-esteem.
Can you give them opportunities to earn their own self-esteem?
That was what I was, that's what I was thinking. Like, we create the conditions for learning, we create conditions for kids to have the self-esteem, positive self-esteem.
We made
through those
mistake.
Other things. Yeah.
We made that mistake for about 20 years in the school business. It came out of a lot of the middle school research that was done from the mid 60s to about the mid 80s. And a part of that, what came out of that was a book called A Nation at Risk, Diane Ravitch. Because for about 20 years, we had thought that we could give kids self-esteem when we didn't understand that we needed to give them opportunities academically to earn their own self-esteem. And that's one of the things that we have to be cautious about. And you folks are instructional experts and you've seen it more than me, but one of the things that you have to really be conscious of when you're an administrator is, do you have teachers that have all these silly games and rules and contests and systems in their classroom that don't really promote learning, but are there to make kids simply feel good about themselves? That's one of those things that we don't see it nearly as much in the last 30 years or 35, but we still see some of that and teachers will argue, well, I'm working on the kids' self-esteem. If you can give them opportunities academically and maybe correct them, as was said a minute ago, and help build them back up, but it has to be in an academic vein. And that's, I think, where we sometimes, especially emerging leaders, make the mistake thinking that if we make kids feel good about themselves, that will translate into academic success, or that we can make them feel good. We can give them the opportunities to earn that. I think that's an important distinction, and I'll hush now.
Oh, that's really good, because you talked about a few things that were actually also part of the chapter where they talked about rules, like having rules that are, good rules with, good teachers that are functioning with it, rules that are understood and accepted by everybody, that the expectation is there. And then also, instead of really like enforcing the rules in terms of, trying to like find people that are not following them, that you're actually promoting positive behavior as much as possible, to really promote that aspect in students, to want to be on that list or want to be at that breakfast or whatever the aspect is academically, to really spark their interest, wherever possible. So I think that was really good. I added in the whole aspect of citizenship, because that was something that they mentioned as well, just having citizenship programs as much as possible to incorporate them, again, promoting positive behavior. And the school as a culture, I really focused on, I have a video clip that's really short, but it's just to watch about school climate and culture. Hopefully it works.
School climate and culture, have a huge impact on student learning. It's something you feel when you walk into a building, and students feel that as well. I was very fortunate in my past few years. I had a secretary named Donna Nichols, and she was a fun-loving redhead who loved the New York Yankees and loved to laugh. And the kids really enjoyed coming into the main office to see her and see us. And parents did too. And that right there is one of the most important things about school climate, is when somebody's walking into the main office. I have the luxury of walking into lots of schools now, and I'm amazed at how much of a difference just going into the main office makes. Because if you're not acknowledged, or you look around and you don't see student artwork and those kind of things, you wonder what kind of school climate it is. Kids feel that when they walk in every day. If that's the feeling you get from the main office, imagine how the feeling they get when they're walking into a school.
I really thought that it was important to emphasize the idea of school climate, because of that whole aspect of the feeling that you get. Because as we know, it's not necessarily, I mean, as instructional leaders, we definitely understand the importance of curriculum, but we know also that there's so many other things that go into this. And so one quote that I just wanted to point out on page 91 really stood out to me was where they talked about the most significant change in school culture happens when school leaders, teachers, and students model values and beliefs important to the institution, which also made me think about what Dr. Law said the other day, like your values and how you're going to actually hold your values or conform to the, like, how are you going to make those decisions? But I think that it was really important to look at that. So I just wanted to point that out. It was a good quote. Okay, I'm going to try to go through this a little quicker because I know I'm like over time, but the 5 premises about school environment and students. And so just really thinking about, again, the emphasis on orderly, promoting self-regulation instead of forcing, and then the staff. And honestly, like, we all know that it really is a whole package. And so everybody has to be on board in order for that to happen. And so really just trying to think about how you actually sustain those values. So with violence and disorder, what I did was I just listed a few of the things that we know are issues within schools. And obviously they all have different implications based on where we are. I know from personal experience, teaching at a middle school in New York, gangs were really something that people needed to know going into it. How to handle it, what were some warning signs. But again, like thinking about bullying and thinking about schools as safe havens, it's important for us to know, which we do know, the knowledge of the community, what actually is happening within the community, and then what are the state and federal policies within all of those situations. So just highlighting that. And then again, just highlighting some important points with the counseling system, just looking at the advisor-advisee system and organizing counseling. There was a lot of information here, but really just looking at how I felt like as it went towards the end of the chapter, it really was focusing on the principal as the facilitator of all these different aspects within the school. Did anybody see that as well? Like seeing as the role kind of was there as a facilitator? Okay, and the last one is just student services. So all students serve, they serve beyond the curriculum. And so it's important to know that that role is played within the administration position. And it's because of the state level, the state involvement within reaching those students that takes place at a school level. And again, just like really focusing on the fact of facilitating all this and everything coming through the principal, regardless of how involved the principal is, but just all that taking place. And again, the whole idea of responsibility. So just really wanted to end with this, just thinking about like how much of an impact as an administrator you have, not only within the school and then your students and the teachers, but also like beyond the school within the community. And as it says, you know, not as a gatekeeper of services, but as a facilitator. That's it. Thanks. Any questions?
Well, I think the beginning of this and where the discussion went was, you know, this important component of the principal being able to set the culture of the school and enhancing the esteem of students, or at least making it possible for them to feel confident and good about themselves. But the support of faculty, which was brought out by one of you, it is so vitally important. So you got all these things, and then this last piece of understanding the roles of the people in the school, and hopefully cross training enough people so that if we have a gap with somebody having to be out for a while or whatever, that there's somebody that can come fill in, and the students or the school doesn't sacrifice because of it. So lots of things to juggle. Good job, Yvonne. But it's you know, I keep going back. You're going to hear it a million times. You know, Dale's going to scare you to death, and I'm going to try to tell you this is the greatest job in the world. And in between there is one of the, you know, you're going to feel really good about the job, because it's a gratifying job. It is a critical job. And those of you who want to be a principal, I think it's the most fulfilling job in the world. And I think Dale will tell you that as well. There's just things you have to always remember, and we'll go into those, and Yvonne just did, and we've got more to come. So with that, Bianca, tell us what else we need to remember. Thank you, Yvonne. You can pull that down. She can load up. Yvonne, you need to stop sharing. There we go.
Hey, Bianca just texted me and said her internet was unstable and it kicked her out, but she's coming back.
All right. Well, let's not waste a moment. Let's go with Shanda. Will you go ahead and do yours, and we'll come back?
Sure.
Thank you for adjusting. We're going to try to stay on track.
No problem.
There, Bianca's back. Bianca, we're going to go ahead and let Shanda go do hers when you got kicked off. We'll come back to you.
Okay. Okay, that's fine.
We didn't know how long you'd be off.
Well, Bianca, your internet may be mean, but I think my laptop is rebellious. I'm sorry.
It's not coming up either, is it? We're having all kinds of problems. The bad thing is I'm doing chapter 8. It really will be disaster.
It'll probably open 14 times in the next 5 minutes, which is worse, I guess.
Well, I'll tell you what. You keep playing with that. Bianca's back. We're going to go back to her.
Okay.
I'll tell you what. We're going to adjust, and then when yours comes up, you can minimize it, and then we'll be back on track. So Bianca, go ahead with chapter 6, and you're muted too. All right, it's up. So unmute. There you go. You're ready to go.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Trying to get it to present here. Okay. All right. So I have the principal, chapter 6, the school curriculum. I have this quote that was at the very beginning of my chapter. It really stood out to me, so I'll let you guys take a look at that. And I think it has a lot to do with Yvonne's chapter also, like building students and building school and positive climates, just making sure that children are able to go out into the community and be great citizens. I have a few important terms. Common Core standards, which I'm almost positive we're all aware of, but that's a state-led effort coordinated by the National Governors Association, Center for Best Practice, and the Council of Chief State School Officers. So these standards were created and put in place to be sure that every child could be on the same page in every state. Curriculum, according to Marsh and Willis, 2007, there are at least 8 varying definitions for the word curriculum. These definitions range from everything taught at school to what is learned from the internet, finally, to all the experiences learned throughout life. Do we believe the curriculum includes planned and unplanned experiences, or the hidden curriculum? Today, we refer to those unplanned experiences as teachable moments. These moments are as important as those planned experiences we are prepared for. Most of the hidden curriculum relates and expands the written curriculum. According to Euban, Hughes, and Norris, it is vital that the principal and all others who lead in the planning and implementation of the school curriculum have an understanding of the theoretical frameworks that help influence each curriculum. McNeil presented 4 basic threads of curriculum theory: technological, academic, humanistic, and social reconstructionist. I found this visual that just kind of puts into perspective how student learning works and how you build instruction and curriculum around it to in turn assist students to make sure that they are learning, and it's just an ongoing cycle. So we are going to discuss each curriculum that McNeil described. The first one being technological curriculum. Klein describes the purpose. He claimed that this conception of curriculum contains the essentials of behavioral objectives: time on task, sequential learning, positive reinforcement, direct instruction, achievement testing, mastery in skills and content, and teacher accountability. The principal's role in this curriculum would be to ensure things are being taught as they were designed, monitor and track progress, challenge through high expectations, guarantee teachers produce high gains in student productivity. So as a principal, if someone would share one way that you would perform your role in this curriculum.
I think one way is to, like what we've been working on, is to monitor and encourage PLCs and model model that PLC process throughout your own team meetings as well as throughout the building to ensure that things are, because that's where the things that are being taught are being designed.
Right.
That's
right.
you're monitoring and tracking progress. So just being visible within the PLC meetings.
Great. Thank you, Mallory.
Have any of you read ahead to task 4 of the app cell
I have.
and the action plan? There's 2 columns in that action plan. One is for formative assessment and the other is for summative. And I know you folks being curriculum experts understand formative is not giving the kids a test halfway through and summative at the end. Formative assessment is what Mallory was just talking about. It's making sure it's fidelity checks. It's getting out of your office and making sure the curriculum is delivered as intended. That's what we in administration refer to as formative assessment. I'm quite sure you do in curriculum instruction as well.
Thank you. The teacher's role would be to implement the curriculum that has been established and teach based on the direction that has been determined. There are critiques of this form of curriculum, and there are few people who believe that there are limitations on concept teaching and learning, and it may hinder proficiency. So this form of curriculum may hinder student proficiency. Right, the academic curriculum is next, and its purpose, as McNeil stated, is used to train minds and teach students to do research. The principal's role in this curriculum would be to model and encourage excellence, celebrate learning throughout the school. So would anybody like to give me a way you would perform your role in this curriculum?
So I'm pulling from an example that we actually use at our school. Our motto last year was #MakeYourMark. And so teachers would submit students who had made their mark in some way, whether it be academic or personal. And the principal would bring them up to the main office, congratulate them, call their parents with them in the office, and then have them sign their name on a board to celebrate their positive performance, whether it be academic or personal, because some students aren't going to get that academic positive mark. So.
I love that. Okay, the teacher's role is disseminator of knowledge and teach based on the direction that has been determined. So for me, that understanding means kind of follow the curriculum to a T. Fidelity, making sure that if you're supposed to be on lesson 1, you're on lesson 1 and your grade level is on lesson 1, as opposed to veering from anything other than the directions that have been given. Some critiques of this form of curriculum is it's uninspiring to students because it is adult-centered, and too much emphasis is on content instead of the process, which is kind of going back to, you know, when you're given a scope and sequence and it says you should be on lesson 3. If your students didn't get lesson 2, then, you know, some teachers or some critics may have an issue with moving on to lesson 3, but the scope and sequence says you should move on. So those are 2 critiques of that curriculum. The next is the humanistic perspective. Its purpose is it's stated that this perspective centers around individuals. So educating the whole child is more important than academic achievement. The principal's role in this form of curriculum would be a role model for important values and behavior necessary for molding the curriculum. And you would also set the tone and serve as a model. So could anybody give me one way we could perform the role of principal in this curriculum?
One of our schools, and it's sort of like mentoring groups, but they're set up for specific students. But what I like about it is the principal takes a group, and it's like a social emotional group too. Like he's helping them talk about making good decisions and making good choices. It's a middle school, but one of the principals started a group. They had different teachers that would do it during their lunch hour. It was like one of their clubs, but one of the principals started and worked with a group of boys. And it wasn't like the Boys to Men Club, but it was something like that. He calls his something specific, their group that he worked with. But that was, I thought a good way that he just modeled his values and, making good decisions and being, honest and a good citizen and helping others. They did like several service projects that he helped that group lead, which I thought that was when I was reading that part, I jotted that in the margin. That's what it made me think of.
Yeah. That is a good example because it's like he set the tone and he served as a model. So he did both of those to try to just encourage students. Once again, like the quote at the beginning of the chapter said, so that they lead fulfilling lives. So we're not just making sure they are academically prepared, but we're making sure that they understand that, with service learning that, we may have to serve as servers, or we may have to act as someone who helps out in the community. So that's really good. Thank you.
I wanted to add something that I think it'll fit here too, is a principal at our school. I don't know how she does it, but she manages at the beginning of the year to meet one-on-one with every 8th grader for like 5 to 10 minutes. And they talk about what are their goals academically to get them ready to go to high school. And then at the end of the year, she has like an after action where they're looking at, how they did. And she gives them some more advice and encouragement before they're going to high school so that they're set up for success.
Oh, that's cool. Thank you.
And I was going to add something to that as well. Our high school, and our football players, they're expected to dress up and they go out into the community and stuff like that. On game days, they have to wear neckties, and they're really pushing for the soft skills with our students and the interview skills. But our school actually partnered with a company in town, and they're called Holla, and they work with them and they actually do interview skills with the students, and they set up interviews for them with other business professionals in our area just to work with them and model, and they even tell them the values that we're looking for, and they work with them from the 9th grade all the way to their senior year. So.
Thank you. Anybody else? So for the teacher's role would be trust, acceptance, and mutual understanding to form relationships. And I just realized that I left out a whole word on this bullet, but it should say establish an atmosphere of learning. So a positive atmosphere where children, can succeed and be successful, because we want to build or help them build that positive self-esteem. And the way to do that is to just kind of combine all of these things in a learning atmosphere. Okay, so the critique of this curriculum would be overemphasis on individuals and not the group. So some feel like if you concentrate on one child too much, the group suffers. As opposed to, building up each child, and difficulty providing a sequential presentation of concepts and skills. So the critique is that while we're focusing on what children need personally or emotionally, we're not focusing on concepts and teaching them academic skills. The final form of curriculum would be social reconstructionism. The purpose of this curriculum is a vehicle for bringing changes in the social order. It's also designed to assist individuals and groups elevate their current conditions and improve opportunities to participate in a democratic society. The principal's role here would be leadership oriented, serve as problem finders and visionary leaders. So with that in mind, and just kind of trying to lead or help them be successful in a democratic society, how could we as principals perform our role in this curriculum?
You could have a like a student council that's voted on by their peers, that like a principal roundtable, where like 2 students from each team per grade level get to meet with the principal, and that's where the principal can really talk about the purpose of, you know, why we do things at the school a certain way. Then the students can actually give some input from their perspective, how we can make the school a better place. And then as, you know, the principal's role of, you know, showing that, you know, they're taking notes and they're giving, you know, opportunities for the students to, you know, provide evidence or support on how we could accomplish those things. We're giving ownership to the students and, you know, making them understand that, you know, just because you have an idea, you know, it might not be able to be implemented, but if you provide a plan of action and it could work, let's try it and give them, you know, if it's not going to completely disrupt everything, give them an opportunity to have some ownership in the school. And I think that's going to change the entire school culture.
Right, I totally agree. Thank you.
That kind of makes me think of something, Kevin, that we have 2 schools. There are 2 middle schools that are combining into one. And so it's not open yet, but what the joint principals did is they, one of them's going to retire, so it'll just be one principal when they go to the new school, but that's a different story. But they had a group of kids, like a kids leadership team of middle schoolers that helped kind of in the planning process about thinking how they're going to set up the school. Like when they would bring ideas, the kids gave ideas and input on, you know, what they wanted the school to look like. They helped name it. They talked about ways to kind of bring the 2, and it's 2 separate communities, how to bring them together as one. Like they have a plan for when the school opens to kind of help, you know, merge the personalities of the 2 different schools. So, and it's worked really well so far. I mean, it hasn't opened yet, but the kids have loved being a part of that.
Right, that sounds amazing. I'm sure that will also build their leadership skills, you know, as they grow older. Cool beans. Anybody else? Okay. All right, the teacher's role would be to serve as a facilitator, bridge between, be a bridge between the students and the community, promote opportunities for collaboration among students. So just like Jamie and Kevin were saying, just kind of encouraging students and allowing them to take leadership roles and just kind of stand back and facilitate that or moderate it, or, you know, just kind of be an overseer and allowing them to develop those leadership skills. In the critics for this form of curriculum, few agree on what's best for the present or future society. So of course we know that with the middle schoolers, you know, trying to help name the school, you know, we know that there's going to be some disagreement, you know, there's still preteens, and then, but that's why you have those adults there to just kind of mold and just be what's best for the present or the future. So that was a great example. So I have a little game that we can play because I have been trying to step up my technology skills in my classroom. So if you would please, you can go to join.nearpod.com, probably using a different device, and the code is there. This is a little matching game where there were some examples from the book for the curriculums, and there's only like 4 curriculums and 4 answers, just to see if you kind of remember which ones can be matched up together. I'm going to go on also. So when you get to join.nearpod.com, it says your teacher will give you a code to join the session, and you just enter that code there. So while you are working, for those of you who may or may not be familiar with Nearpod, this was the first Nearpod I actually created. Yay me. And what you can do is when you create Nearpods, our county accounts for us, which makes it kind of free for me. But when you create the Nearpods, you can actually go in while the students are working and answering the questions and just see how they are working and if they have mastered the concept of whatever it is that you're trying to teach. This little matching game, like I said, it's just something that I did. I thought it would be a little bit different, something to kind of break the monotony of PowerPoints and talking. So if you're, interested in using it for your students, I'm sure they would love it. My conclusion is just the principal's role in curriculum administration. And these are the 6 ways that principals participate in curriculum. Curriculum analysis, curriculum design and school improvement, curriculum delivery, which would be observations, curriculum flexibility, which means simply understanding that we may not always be on task because there may be some strategies or other things that children did not get the lesson before. Curriculum continuity, which means that you are doing what you're supposed to be doing regularly in your classrooms or in the school. And curriculum balance, just being the one who creates the balance for teachers and students. Anybody have any questions?
All right, thank you, Bianca. And I'd never heard of Nearpod, so thank you for sharing that. And I want you to know that I got 4 for 4.
Yay!
Yes, which is so rare, so I had to brag about it. So that means you did a good job presenting it. And
I'd make him show his work.
Wait a minute. No, I bet it went away.
Thank you, guys.
I could. But anyway, thanks. That was fun. Shanda, did you find it? Did it come up?
Yes, sir. I think I'm ready.
Okay, let's roll with it.
Okay. Hope everyone can see correctly. And I am doing chapter 7, which is promoting student achievement. And I found this quote particularly interesting. As educators, high student achievement is something we all desire. In recent years, it has become both a state and national priority among political leaders as well. As a result, the landscape of education and the role of the principal have changed dramatically. And what that triggered in my mind was at one point, and I don't remember which class it was, we had a discussion, and one of our instructors mentioned that as principal, you have this long list of responsibilities, and yet you are judged based on the academics. So just looking at the image that I found, it kind of reminded me of that whole conversation and how, you know, we have this long list and that little figure is trying to climb this ladder, and yet here are all these boxes that he also has to check off too. And to me, it just made a lot of sense that, you know, in leadership as an administrator for a school or in any other kind of leadership, while we may have multiple responsibilities and multiple passions and callings, we really kind of get judged by this one thing. So it kind of behooves us to pay attention, not necessarily to prioritize over other responsibilities, but to give it some attention, a little extra TLC. So one of my questions was, when we think about how the role of a teacher and a principal has shifted over the years, what have we noticed that has changed? Just, I mean, this is my 16th year and I have seen massive changes in education. And I was wondering if any of you would be willing to share, what are some changes in education that you've seen, whether it's policy or site-based or federal, state? What are some changes that you've seen since your career began?
I know personally, as I have seen, is there is less creativity that is imposed on teachers. When I first started, we didn't have just the internet to go in and teacher pay teacher. You had to create everything. You had to come up with ways to reach your children. And so now it seems like there's a shift even in the way teachers see the curriculum, where they're looking for something to do. They're looking for someone out there to tell them what they should do. And just a side note, I was in a meeting and one of the teachers said, well, what are we gonna do? I don't see that on Tools for Teachers. And so it's almost like if it's not out there, they've lost that creativity to create it. So that's one of the biggest shifts I've seen.
That's interesting. And I happen to agree with you, although I don't think I would have articulated that. Thank you, Tiffany. Who else has noticed some major shifts in education?
Kind of like what I was thinking along the same lines as Tiffany. This is my 13th year, but even still, the way I teach now and the way we're expected to teach now compared to the way that I taught when I started is completely different. And Tiffany, when this question was posed, the first thing I thought of is I know several teachers in my building who would have no idea what to do without these teacher pay teacher unit plans that they buy for ridiculously amounts of money. And I don't understand. And it's a huge shift. And it's like they're locked into that now. And I know I'm thinking of one teacher in particular that she, before PLCs came along, she didn't even look at standards. She taught every lesson in that unit binder that she bought off of Teachers Pay Teachers. So, and that goes back to principals making sure that the curriculum's being taught and being in the classrooms and being visible. So I just think like there's been a huge shift in the 13 years that I've been in the classroom as well.
Wow, you know, it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like, you know, probably about as I was entering education, there was this big push of, we don't want your textbooks, we don't need your textbooks. I mean, I remember my first year as a teacher saying, what's a basal? I'd never heard of that. I was floor blocks trained. If somebody had said reading book, I might have known what you were talking about. But now, I don't know if it's due to the overwhelming set of standards, especially in elementary schools, that teachers are looking for, or what, but they're almost kind of pushing back of, well, if I can't use my textbook, then give me something else that will help me march through this. So I think that's an interesting perspective. One of the key things that I found so super important in chapter 7 was the discussion on control. Teachers are supposed to be some of the most flexible people in the world, and we are, but I don't know many teachers who are flexible and love to be so. So what they pointed out for us is that while things have changed and have shifted, we can't necessarily control the standards that our state adopts. We can have some influence, but it's one voice among many. Again, we can't necessarily control the testing. We don't even always get to control the subject matter that's taught, that content, but we do get to control the process of teaching and learning. That power still lies in instruction. It can be shared through a shared vision from our principals. It can be in our classrooms just as a grade level or as a department level. That's where our power lies. And I think if we were honest, although I personally would love to control all of that just because that's my weird sin nature coming out, the thing that has the most impact is the thing that's still within my influence. So I think that's definitely something comforting. And let me see here. All right. When we start planning for curriculum and instruction, we do have to consider a few things. The first one is the organizing and the grouping of students, because whether it is random or intentional, and hopefully it's intentional, we still have to make some choices. So there are 3 variables when it comes to grouping. The first one deals with class size. The second one deals with class composition, who's in the class, and then flexibility. If we put them in this class or in this group, are they stuck? Is this it? Is this their one shot and they can never go anywhere else? Also to consider with grouping, we have factors such as the ability to make variations, especially when we're looking at these homogeneous groupings. I know many of us are still in the classroom. When we group, we're typically grouping based on a common factor, whether that is ability or a strength or a weakness or an interest. We're still looking for that common factor that says this group of 3 fits together in this way. However, that doesn't always work out to be best or simple. The other thing that we have to think about, and this is new as we shift our minds from classroom teachers to school administrators, is we also have to start considering cost. The cost of design, in our book, it talks about how we can know that the best thing for students is to have a very small ratio of students to teachers. I think the number they mentioned was 3. And we can know that, but we can't afford that. So we have to find some kind of balance between what is best for kids and what we can actually afford to do. And that's, I think, if I were guessing just based on the conversations that I've had with administrators, that's usually one of the most difficult decisions, is putting what's best for kids against what can actually be done. The research does support smaller class sizes. However, especially those of us, realizing and recognizing that there are some factors that are just not in our control, we can actually look at the benefits of smaller class sizes and see what we can do to apply those, because it's not just a lack of bodies in a classroom that makes this an effective teaching experience or an effective learning experience. It's what goes on as a result. Those things can kind of comfort us and give us hope and help us remember that, hey, I may have, and I have, and I'm sure some of you have too, I may have 30 kids in a classroom, and 27 of them are boys, and I'm teaching math, and God help me, I'm an ELA teacher, but these are some things that I can do. So looking at things that make smaller class sizes more effective is you do get a chance to cover basic instruction quickly and in greater depth. Kids get more opportunities for enrichment. But the ones that I really love are the ones that talk about how we can better individualize instruction. These are hard times. I know, especially if you are back in the classroom like I am. I know Kelsey is. It's hard. It's so hard right now. But when we look at the opportunities that are coming as a result of this pandemic and the hybrid teaching that we're having to do, the individualized instruction is there. The opportunity, students are reaching out to us now more than ever. So the opportunity to be able to focus and zero in is huge. And that is something that, with a great deal of effort, and yes, it is exhausting, but with that effort, we can focus on individualized instruction. We can give personal attention to each student, and it may not be sitting by their desk and helping them through a problem. It may just be passing them in the hall and saying, hey, you know what? I noticed that you seemed a little tired this morning. If you need something, let me know. And just letting them know that we notice them, which brings me to my absolute favorite, which is a closer student-teacher relationship. Working on my dissertation right now. And Mallory, I know you've discovered the same thing, but the number one protective factor for students dealing with trauma, students building resilience, students just trying to have a healthy mindset overall, is positive relationships. And that is something we can do, and it may stretch us, but we can do it with 2 kids or we can do it with 200. It can be done. You just have to find a way. The other thing that I thought was interesting and a little ambiguous in our text was the talk on page 139 about how engagement is also impacted by class size. But if you'll notice in the text, it's page 139, the very last paragraph before group composition, is it doesn't necessarily say whether the impact is a positive or a negative. It just talks about the impact and how engagement can go. I know personally, when I had that crazy class of 27 boys and 3 girls teaching math, engagement was high just because we enjoyed being together. We made it fun. And then I've also had classes where, even in this hybrid, I've got 4 or 5 kids, and sometimes it's like pulling teeth to help them understand that, yeah, this is weird, but we are a family. So just keeping in mind that engagement can be impacted by class size. That doesn't mean that it's a factor that you can't control. It's just a factor that you can be mindful of and try to make sure you have an impact on. And group composition, this is who is in the group. Guys, I know that you've read this and we already know the answer, but ability grouping permanently or for even an extended amount of time is not the answer. Research does not support that. Can we bring kids together who have a certain area that they need to grow in? Absolutely. But it needs to be temporary. You need to basically help them with that skill and then let them move on from there. So things to consider when you are grouping for ability is think about the complexity of individuals. You know, I was that kid who was a high, I know it'll shock you, a high verbal linguistic and a terrible logical math person. And I still am, and I still have to work on that. But, you know, you have kids who, for whatever reason, they excel in social studies, and that's their niche, and it works for them. So we have to remember that people are complex. We also have to keep in mind that you know, everybody's smart in some way, and it may not be smart in a way that shows academic content. So even as we're working on helping them build an academic skill in some classrooms, we can also provide opportunities for them to shine or support that skill with what they do have as a strength. Also, keep in mind that when we're ability grouping, that can be a major impact on attitude and mindset for us and for the students. We definitely want to be careful to make sure that we communicate that this is temporary. This is only a support. This has nothing to say about your value. This is just 100%, hey, I noticed a struggle. Let me see if I can help. And group flexibility kind of is like the then part of the if you are going to group, and we know that we really do have to, the groups need to be flexible. You can group by skills, interest, achievement. You can have multiple groupings, multiple patterns. I know being an ELA teacher, I'm pretty much teaching 3 subjects in one class period, and that can be tough. So it is possible for me to have groups of students who excel in reading but are struggling with the writing. Maybe we're all working on grammar together, but yes, you can and you should have multiple grouping patterns. Also, thinking about this overall, grouping should take place in the classroom. And according to our text, it is best decided by classroom teachers. Some things to avoid, please don't maintain the same groups all year long. And also make sure that we're not grouping for more than 1/3 of the day or 1/3 of the class. They do need direct instruction, whole group and individual and independent study. Also, don't refer all your grouping decisions to administration. I know if and when we become administrators, we'll probably, at least in the beginning, I know I talked about my issues with control. You know, we may want to be involved in those discussions, but also keeping in mind that really it is the classroom teacher who knows what's best and who has that power. So definitely keeping that in mind. The next thing deals with instruction, and I kind of had to smile because those of us coming from the EDCI program, we are very familiar with how people learn. So not to traumatize anybody, but I did put the book cover up just so we can remember that, yes, we've seen this. And I put the IRIS module standards and the how people learn symbol up for us too, just as a friendly reminder that high quality instruction really is high quality instruction across the board, pre-K to grad students. High quality instruction needs to be learner centered. We need to make sure that we are focused on helping students make connections to their personal lives. Knowledge center, we're definitely coming back to that curriculum, and assessment centered. Providing feedback, not assessment for any other reason than for improvement. Especially that formative assessment needs to be timely, it needs to be actionable, and then of course community centered, not necessarily centered on what's happening in your local community, but that your school, your classroom is a community of learning, and that what students see in their environment reinforces what you're trying to teach. if I want my students to read, they need to see me reading. They need to know that I have a stack of books that I can't wait to get to if and when I graduate. They need to know that I write blogs and attempt to publish articles if I want them to write too. So basically, we are modeling the learning that we are hoping and the practice that we are hoping that they're also going to take advantage of. And finally, I plan to do a breakout room. I don't think that's going to work for us, but the instructional skills that we're looking for when we are focused on high student achievement are things that EDCI people are absolutely 100% familiar with. Not only are they things that we have studied through our program, but they are also, at least in South Carolina, the components of the teacher evaluation system, whether you are a new teacher trying to get your full credentials, or if you are a 5-year renew teacher, these are the skills that your evaluators are looking for. So instead of doing a breakout room to be mindful of time, I was wondering, is there anybody who might be willing to share some examples of strong planning, lesson implementation, and so forth?
All right, so let me interrupt. I'm not sure what you were asking there.
Well, in our breakout room, I was planning to let everyone look at a different section depending on which room they were in,
Right.
and give us an example of planning or an example of cooperative learning.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I'm sorry.
So I think time on a task is important, as far as allowing students the opportunity to have some face-to-face instructions done. I'm also talking about in the virtual learning we're doing now, have 10, 15 minutes of instruction time, and then have them process and complete an independent activity. Typically, the language arts and math teachers I work with in the inclusion setting, we will stay on the Zoom meeting or the MS Teams meeting while the kids are working in case they want to pop back on and have questions. But, you know, our district even recommends 10 to 15, maybe 20 minutes at the most of instruction for them, and then letting them loose to have their time to complete it so they don't have any homework during virtual learning.
Sure.
And I think that's important also for administrators. Like our principal today sent out that we had a meeting, we had our grade level meetings where we met about our PDPs, and she gave us until September 17th to complete that. So I think it's as important for us to give our students time to work on assignments as it is administration to give us time to complete tasks on top of our normal teaching duties.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I would also say, especially according to our text, not only should we provide that time for them, but this, especially these days, there is a significant difference between the percentage of time that students are actually actively on task. So this is not a time for us to necessarily sit back and breathe our fresh air. This is a time where we need to be actively monitoring, because the difference between students who are achieving highly and students who are not is a pretty significant percentage of time actually on task, actually actively engaged. So that's huge. Thank you for pointing that out.
My biggest thing is the student motivation piece, because I feel like if you can have the best lesson in the world, all the materials you want, but if a child is not motivated to learn, it's all for naught. And motivating students, like almost like what I think it was Dr. Lamb earlier, with the self-esteem, that to me that goes with that motivation. They have to want it. They have to motivate themselves to learn, and the teacher has to provide that opportunity for them. And I like the way the text put it, where you're not celebrating. I'm not going to celebrate your A. I'm going to celebrate your effort. I'm going to celebrate how much you put into it. If you give me a wrong answer and it's from your heart, the fact that you even tried, we're celebrating that. If you said one word yesterday but said 3 today, and so just getting kids motivated and excited to put forth what they know, I think that is huge. So I love seeing that.
Mm-hmm. I love that you brought that out. I have a student this year with a situation that is brand new to me. She is mute, and due to some past experiences in her life, and right now we are celebrating the fact that she's willing to communicate at all. She wrote me a letter just yesterday and said, I want to talk to you. Is it okay if I do it on paper? So, I mean, we're celebrating that. So absolutely, motivation, any willingness to engage is phenomenal. Thank you for pointing that out, Tiffany.
And Tiffany, I love the fact that you were talking about celebrating those achievements, because I think that sometimes teachers get so grade driven, especially, and I mean, when you're an EOC like I am, you're very, very focused on student achievement. And so something that we started doing is growth assessment charts. So I'm talking data with my students all the time, like this is your EVOS data and this is where you've started. And at every unit test, I mean, they might have failed the unit test and it might look terrible, but I'm like, look how much growth you've shown. I'm like, you were supposed to score a level 1, and look, you scored a level 2 on this. And just for them to see that it's not about the grade. And I tell them, I don't care what grade you make. I just want to see that you're trying and that we can go back and look at it. And something that was super powerful is that now it's not just that I'm looking at their data, they're looking at it. So at the end of their benchmarks, they're looking at, oh, I didn't understand this standard, but now I know what standard I need to go back and look at. And so we actually have them write out the standards that they did very well on, the ones that they didn't do so well on, and then what they think that they did different between the two standards, and then how they think they can improve on that next standard. So before their next test. And so then we give them another benchmark, and we do 3 benchmarks before their final exam. And so, I mean, it helps me as a teacher to see where they are, but it also encourages them because they're like, oh, I know I understand that standard. I know I'm going to do well on that 20% of the test. And so I think just the encouragement from the teacher also helps for the student motivation.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. Thank you, Alicia. Dr. Laws, unless anyone else wants to add something, I think I'm finished. The only thing I have left is my reference page.
Thank you, Shanda. And you know, the neat thing about the last really 2 chapters is if you folks are experts in a number of things, and certainly these 2 are 2 examples of that. So you already have this in your toolbox, so to speak, and so we could have talked all night about these things with the stories that you all have to tell and share with one another. I guess I just kind of smile because Ubin writes these 2 chapters, but you folks could write the book. I mean, you know it, and that's the comforting thing going through. I kind of would be curious. Not to divert too much, but did you see things that was in this book as a principal leader that you didn't agree with, and that would be interesting. But we're not going to go there. But
can I do a quick pop quiz before we go further?
Oh Lord, go ahead.
Can everybody pop up their chat right quick? All right. Did y'all cover the STAR report in curriculum instruction? No? All right, it's the most famous report ever in education. And it was the entire state of Tennessee did a reduced class size project. It was about Shanda's report on reduced class size and teaching strategies and delivery. It kind of encompasses a lot of what she just covered. And so I've got 4 choices there. Can everybody see that? from me to everyone. In a primary school, how do you get the most performance out of students? And here are your 4 choices. 30 students in the class, the teacher assistant, 15 with the TA, 30 no TA, and 15 no TA, no teacher assistant. Primary grades. What order should those 4 go in? Quickly, because I'm taking up your time. I'll give you the answer right quick. They're in reverse order. "30 students in a class with a teacher with no TA does better than 15 with a TA or 30 with a TA. Why? If you got somebody to grade your papers, what do you tend to do? Give out worksheets. If you don't have TA and you can reduce class size, that's the best, because you can differentiate your instruction and do individualized rather than whole group all the time. It speaks to what Shanda was just talking about. These are things we know that you've got to deal with as an administrator. But if you haven't read the STAR report from Tennessee, you should read that if you're going to be an administrator. I'm done.
Dr. Lamb, can I jump in there too?
Sure.
And also I looked at that when I was looking at with the TA, because I see how my principal uses our TAs. It's almost like if you walk into some classrooms, you can't tell a teacher between you can't tell between a teacher and a TA. And she makes the TAs go through the same reading training as the teachers. And does that, I mean, I'm thinking about that having an impact as well.
It does. That speaks to individualized instruction. But what was going on in Tennessee, if you read that study carefully, was teachers were just doing worksheets and whole group instruction because they had somebody who's sitting there all day, their TA sat in the corner, and guess what they did? They graded those worksheets. And so you're better off not to have a TA because it was about worksheets and whole group instruction. That class size is relative to what you're doing with them. That's the whole class size debate. It's just not a number. It's what are you doing with the number that you have. And if you utilize your TAs correctly, certainly you can do better. But if you use them as simply paper graders and you've got somebody to do that, it's much easier as a teacher to simply do whole group instruction and give out worksheets. And so that's the whole notion. Even if you only have 15 in your room, if you're still doing whole group and worksheets, that's no good. It's not just the absolute number, it's what you're able to do. It's that individualized instruction, it's that delivery system, it's that modality that matters. And that's one of the things that as administrators, when you do your walkthroughs, your fidelity checks, that's what you're looking for. Are students engaged? What strategies are the teachers using when you walk in? That's what's important. That's a good point, Tiffany, though. It's about
how they're used. It's about how they're used. But I will tell you, it's interesting when the STAR report came out, because many of you have been in it long enough to remember that there were, you had K3 teacher assistants, and then it went to K2 teacher assistants, and now it's K1, and sometimes not even that, and trying to figure out how to use it. So the TA job is diminishing quickly, and I don't know. I mean, and I do think it's the result largely of the STAR report. But it's also the result of a lot of frustration on the part of teachers and on the part of administrators. Sometimes in some schools, the TAs were a rather powerful group because they were local community members and they had their pulpit. But that's a whole nother political story that we'll get into when you get your second doctorate, everybody. Shanda, what's the name of your cat?
Well, right now it's anything ugly that I can think of, but she usually goes by Piper. She's just a big baby. I'm so sorry.
No, we've got one too. We inherited from my mother-in-law, and he usually comes up here to let me know he's up here. But anyway, that's another story. All right. I'm sorry, everybody, but you're going to have to put up with me for just a moment. The good news for you is that I'm not going to take a long time with this because Dale covers a lot of this. I've got the special students and special services piece, and I'm going to make more editorial comments than knowledgeable things. But Ubin starts off with this idea that there are two ethics that you deal with as a principal. One is the ethics of justice, and one is the ethics of care. And I hope you'll note the difference here, because the justice piece is this fairness and equality piece and respecting the rights of others, and then your ethics of care is based on this personal relationship that you have with students. And I'm reminded of this because, you know, as students look on to other students and how they're treated in the school, and do you treat every student the same? And there's this argument that some want to make that we should treat everybody the same, and I understand that argument. But when you're dealing with students from various backgrounds and various needs, that's simply not always possible. And so this comes into play. And so students who, when a discipline situation arises, who are guilty of the same offense, but you treat differently with discipline, it's one of your greatest headaches as a principal, because people don't understand that. Students don't understand it, and by the time they get that story home to their parents, it's an even more challenging situation. And so I thought it was neat that the chapter kind of began with this, that you have these two ethical pieces, the one of justice and the one of care. But one of the things that Dale will, I think, share with you, and we have case studies that deal with it, and then we discuss it in depth, is this whole idea of you know, when a student with significant issues disrupts a class and continuously disrupts a class, when do the rights of the rest of the students come into play? And how do you deal with that as a school leader? How do you deal with it as a teacher first, but then as the school principal, how do you address this, meeting the needs of the student that clearly is behaving because of some exceptionality, or oftentimes is, even if it's just because of the frustration that accompanies that exceptionality, versus the rest of the students, or the majority of the students in the class, who are doing as prescribed in the class and are being interrupted by the student with the exceptionality. And where do all the rights of all the students come into play? So it's stuff you wrestle with, and he does a good job bringing that up. We have a section on FERPA. I'm keeping track of time. Tiffany, it doesn't look good for you tonight. I'm sorry, you've already sent me your PowerPoint, and thank you for that. We'll probably do you next week. I'm going to finish in time so we can have chapter 9 done before we sign off tonight. But there's a section on FERPA. Everybody's aware of FERPA. My favorite FERPA story is I had a student who went off to school, and for whatever reason needed a copy of her high school transcript, and she was 18, and so she asked her dad, who I played golf with most weekends, his name was Bert, to come by and pick up the transcript, which I couldn't give him because she was 18, and reading the letter of the law, Bert went crazy, He says, but you know me and you know my daughter. But she had to give written permission for him to pick it up. We didn't have that. And so we had to go through that, and he was going crazy. And I just said, you know, I love you, Bert, but I'm not going to jail for you. But there are all kinds of provisions with FERPA. Dale's going to say this to you a million times, folks. You don't have to know all components of the law. You need to know who to ask. And that is the most important thing as an administrator, is always know where to look, whether it's who to look for or where to look in a manual. But that's the key. It's not that you know all of these laws that we go through. So next one is 504, and we're all familiar with that, which prohibits the exclusion of students with disabilities from all of these things, and it provides students with disabilities all of these things, so that we need to be equitable in the providing of these supports and not neglecting the students those supports. And then we get to IDEA with the inclusion of the improvement, the I here, and which began as Public Law 94-142, which Dale will get into in depth. But this is where you roll out the whole idea of getting parental participation and doing the IEP goals and all of those things that come with it. I'm going to say to you what you already know, but just remember that your IEPs are contracts and you've got to uphold them. So be careful what you write, and be sure that you have people on the IEP team that will not only support the needs of the student, but also support the school and the school district, because you can't sign your life away. Don't offer things that you cannot deliver, because it's a contract. So it's very important to have a team there making those decisions. Questions to be answered in the IEP. How does the student's disability affect his or her involvement in their progress in the generated curriculum, and what particular goals and objectives are put into the IEP, and what other educational needs result from the disability, so that you can add those, what other related services are needed so that the student can progress, what monitoring procedures are in place, and has the IEP responded appropriately to the student needs. Those are pieces that need to be looked at. Who is on the IEP team? Critical piece. Obviously, the parent is at least one gen ed teacher. Probably all of you have been on an IEP team. It's an experience, and many of you are on several IEP teams. You need at least one SPED teacher. You need an LEP or LEA representative to be on the IEP team. Usually that comes from district office, and then a person capable of interpreting if that's needed, and explaining evaluation results. So school psychologist often is a part of that, and then others that are deemed necessary. And sometimes the child is there. In my experience, the child usually wasn't. I can't remember one that I was part of that the child was there. Many of you may have other experiences. Least restrictive environment.
Dr. Laws?
Yes.
Typically, students aren't invited to their IEP meetings until the age of 14. They can attend if the parents bring them before 14, but students are not invited to come before 14.
Well, there you go. I appreciate that information, but so in your experience, do students often come if they're older than 14?
Yes. Well, we invite them because that's where, at being at age 14, we start the transition component. So that has to have student input. You can collect data through transitions assessments prior to the meeting, but it's always best if you have the child there to talk with the team about what their long-term goals are.
And I was going to say, I'm at the high school, and every meeting I've ever been to, the student's been there.
Mm-hmm. So. They should be.
Well, I'm not saying they shouldn't be. I'm trying to think. I just don't remember that they were there.
Were you elementary?
No, I was secondary.
Really?
No, but you also have to remember that that was 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Shoot, we didn't even call them IEPs, I don't think. But no, I mean, or we did, but I think it was. Well, I just it's a distant memory. But you do have the least restrictive environment with inclusion and mainstreaming as the two components of that. Inclusion is the main thing that we do now. We could get into editorials on whether inclusion is effective or not. And some of you are in schools where it's totally effective. Others have been a part of inclusion processes that have not worked, but that's the least restrictive. Then you have the discipline issue with this. The key here is due process. That's always going to be a key when suspensions are involved and more substantial disciplinary pieces. Be sure to follow what the IEP says when you're disciplining, and then you got the suspension of 10 days max during the school year, and after that you go through the processes that go with that. And then there's the dealing with the parents, and Ubin gives the 4 types of parents: the supportive parent, the denying parent, the non-responsive parent, and the belligerent and demanding parent. And I have experienced all of those, and all of you have experienced all of those. And perhaps the most frustrating of all is the third one, when you just can't get a response out of the parent. But anyway, you got all that, and then you have the guardian ad litem that get involved in the process as well, and those being court appointed and serve as an advocate for the student. And then one of the things when you do your OMA, I know that they talk about special POPs in there, and special POPs aren't limited to students with exceptionalities from the typical pieces that we think of. You also have English language learners, and you also, believe it or not, would classify the gifted student as a special POP in many cases. So being able to address that, but there is a section on the ELLs, and we won't go into that, but the various ways to meet their needs with pull-out programs, et cetera. I just have great disdain for pull-outs in any way, shape, or form if you can get around it. And then the last piece is working with DSS and other public welfare agencies. And I think this is an important section of this book, and some protocols to put into place. Number one, make sure you see the credential of the person coming. Don't assume that they're telling you the truth. And then the other things that I think are not surprising, but things to keep in mind. Seek to have a school representative present during an interview. That doesn't always happen. In fact, there are often times that it doesn't happen, but it's good to have a school rep in with the representative of DSS if they're interviewing a student. You do have some control for the time and the place of the conference. They generally will call and tell you that they're coming and try to make an appointment, and you want to try to protect instructional time and in truth lessen the potential embarrassment for the child. But obviously there are emergency situations too that you just have to take care of. Be sure and keep documentation of the conference with time, place, date, and names of persons that are present so that you can refer to that should it come up again. And again, going back to the original piece of protecting student information, you do not give access to student records without a signed release from the parent or a court order. They usually will come in with one or the other. So that was a quick go through for chapter 8. You're going to spend a good bit of time on this, and we will have case studies that go with it. Anybody have any comment on that?
Let me unmute I have one. Go back to your chat. My first post tonight, 3 physical tips to promote school culture. 2 of those deal with privacy issues. No loitering by staff or students in reception. Teachers tend to talk about kids. Most problems that I ever had with FERPA, it was that kind of thing. And the second is don't do discipline in your front office either. Protect the rights of kids and protect kids. Those are 2 big keys to protecting kids, their information, their persona, their person. FERPA is not just physical records. It can also be verbal things that are said about kids. Those are 2 things that you should absolutely not allow in your school, and to promote the protection of school, of kids in your school as the centerpiece of your school culture. Thank you.
All right, Alicia, you're going to be the last one tonight. Tiffany, you just gonna have to be mad at me. We'll get you next week.
And I will make it as quick as possible to get us out of here on time.
12 minutes. You think you can do it?
I have faith in myself.
I have faith in you.
We'll just have to cut down on some of the discussion, and that's completely okay. So my chapter was chapter 9, and it was on human resource development. And the quote that started off the chapter was, if schools want to enhance their organizational capacity to boost student learning, they should work on building professional community that is characterized by shared purpose, collaborative activity, and collective responsibility among staff. And I was going to discuss with everybody a couple of things that kind of jumped out from this quote, and it's all things that we've done in previous evidences. So making sure that we're building that professional learning community, and that we start off with a shared vision, that we're collaborating with each other, and that there's responsibility. So those are the roles that people take in the schools, and it makes the community itself stronger, and you build your school culture together. And so this section is under the building a positive school culture, and that's the big push for the human resource development. So a bit of an overview is that the human resource development is both a concept and a process. So it's a concept because you want to utilize your organization's most valuable resources, and the humans are the most valuable resources. You as the staff of an organization is the most valuable resource. And then it's a process because you have to look at the integration of different functions such as policies, philosophies, procedures, and practices. And then it's a process because you have to look at professional development and the evaluation of your personnel. And like I said, I'm going to roll through this and do it super fast. So if I'm going too fast, just kind of slow me down. So the integration of the individual and the organization actually happens in 3 different stages. So the first stage is going to be your entry stage. And what I did was I separated it by what happens with the individual versus what happens with the organization. So with the entry stage, the individual has to first make the right career choice. So if you didn't go to school to be a teacher, why are you headed in this direction for a particular reason? So I did not go to school to be a teacher. I was lateral entry. So this one kind of spoke to me about searching for the appropriate position. And then the organization has to determine the nature that's needed for the job, what kind of skills are needed, and what kind of position that they're posting, and what would be an appropriate selection for that position. And then you move into your socialization stage. So the important part about the early stage is that the integration portion between the individual and the organization, if it's not done effectively, then it will affect the next stage. but if it is done effectively, it kind of guides into the socialization stage a little bit easier. So your socialization is when the individual has a vision about where they're going to be in the future in that organization. And the organization also does a view of their own of where they see that individual moving in that organization. And sometimes the book even mentioned your version, the individual's version of what's going to happen, and their views and visions can be vastly different than the organization. And so the important part is that those two visions have to kind of come together before you can move into mutual acceptance. So that's the last stage where the needs and the expectation of both the individual and the organization meet together. So the book also discusses the difference between an institutional view of a career versus an individual view of a career. And I was going to have us discuss the different levels and how your lens has to change based on your position. So your focus is going to be different when you're a teacher versus when you're an administrator. So the institutional view is going to be, you're looking to judge the profession and you want to measure the success, whereas the individual view, why are you doing it? And the intrinsic motivation made me think about Daniel Pink's book, and I think the book's name is Drive because it just left me, where he talks about intrinsic motivation and how he encourages how if you're not intrinsically motivated, that it actually lessens the amount of productivity that's made. So if you're invested in it, then you're going to maximize your potential. So it then carries on into the levels of opportunity and looking at the individual and group needs. So we're looking at teaching, evaluation, and staff development, and those can all be determined by the uniqueness of the teacher. So I am going to take just a minute, and I know that we talked about last week, and I believe it was in Kelsey's presentation, where she said that she had sat in a professional development that had nothing to do with what she needed. And so I'm curious to know if that's happening right now with our big transition into digital learning. Anybody?
I actually think now is the first time when you are getting the professional development you truly need, because everything is centered around that technology and it's brand new. So I feel like I am learning something that I have to apply right now, not just put on a shelf and keep moving.
That's great. Anybody else want to share?
I'm tickled that EC teachers are finally being included in our math and language arts PLCs at school, because in the past, you know, would attend the first couple and then we get busy and would have IEP meetings and other conflicts, you know, in the EC world come up and we weren't able to attend them. And this year, they want us to go to them, even though they say if you have conflicts, we're going to make sure the meetings are recorded so you can still attend. But they've carved out a schedule for us to allow for us to have the opportunity to interact with these teachers, because it's hard when you have, I have 5 preps and then 2 EC inclusion classes. And it's hard to make time unless it's like a set time every week. And we do that on Friday during our Flex Fridays. So it just makes it easier for us to understand exactly where we're going and what we're doing and the lessons they have planned out for us.
And I mean, and that's exactly what I was thinking, is that, you know, the discussion has completely changed. We're being trained on Canvas, and now of course, like, I don't need introduction training, whereas like new teachers might need that. But I also feel like we're not being shoved in a box right now. We're being told, here, be creative, reach your students. And so I think that the uniqueness of the teacher is really getting to shine right now, just because, and the individual needs. Like the art teacher down the hallway from me, she's like, this is the first time that I haven't felt like I'm wasting my time. And so I wanted to stop there because I think that that was an important highlight in this chapter. I found this very interesting. So teachers' needs determined by experience, maturity, and readiness. And so all this is, and I'm not going to go into each one of them, is it's the different stages. So years of experience, and I mean, we've all been in that 1 to 3 year phase. And then as we move through, and as you read the chapter, or at least when I was reading it, when I was going through these different stages, I was like, oh, yep, I remember the first 3 years. I felt just like that. I had no idea what I was doing. And then even comparing that to your maturity and readiness levels, and just kind of seeing where I started and where I am now, and hopefully not getting to the disengaged portion of my education. So, and then looking at the professional development, when they were talking about the professional development, they wanted to look at making it more effective for the classroom setting. And so they actually broke it down into 3 different sections of results driven, systems thinking, and just looking at each one of those and seeing how that they compare to each other, and then matching the teachers' differences to the staff development that they needed. And I know I'm going super fast. The personal evaluation and supervision, I thought that this was interesting because it goes through all of the things that, because I wasn't a teacher, I didn't know was valuable. So I didn't understand why I was having all these observations and the pre and post conferences and the evaluations. And like, as I worked after my first year doing my lateral entry courses and things like that, like all of those things kind of came together and I understood it more. But just knowing your merit and worth, knowing the importance of the summative and formative evaluations, and moving through, and just knowing your value as a teacher. And then this is where I'll end, but with the positive reinforcement is looking at the mentoring, and just knowing that even as teachers, we do need that positive reinforcement. So even with the professional development, and remember, we are the most valued asset that the school has. And so the school needs to focus on giving us the professional development that we need, even that if it's in an in-house service. And I'll end with this part, and I felt like this was something that really resonated, was because of our history with bad experiences of in-service training, that's why there's so much resistance to professional developments. And that in this chapter, we see that there are better approaches to making sure that every individual gets what they need. I'm done.
I'll tell you what, Alicia, you have become an immediate hero. Group. I'm gonna close with this, and then Dale will wrap it up. But the EDLS program, as we have tried to evolve, we had a 12-hour class that was a curriculum leadership class that in the original program, and we have since come up with 2 9-hour classes. The first one is developing curriculum that is data driven. How do you use data to build a curricular program? And then there's the human resource leadership piece that is the adult learning piece, the very thing that Alicia was talking about. And I'm thankful that we have adjusted our whole program to emphasize the very thing that you talked about, Alicia, which is taking care of our people, giving them the support that they need to do their job better. And I can't think of, I mean, all of these components of leadership are so vitally important, but supporting the faculty, I mean, it's got to be at the top of your list. it's like you said, Alicia, we're going to be as good as the people who work with us are. I mean, that's it. And to be naive about it, to think that everybody is at the same level and ready to fly, it's crazy. It's not that way in any business, and it's certainly not that way in our business. So that adult learning component is tremendously important. Thank you for a quick summary of Chapter 9. Tiffany, you'll lead us off next week. Thank you for doing that. Dale, what else we got?
Thank you. I'm going to take you home here. Always remember, whether you hired them or whether you inherited them, your number one job as a school administrator is to make your teachers successful. Have a good evening.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
She had to take care of that cat.